This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Why aren't more people encouraging like me? I'm so lonely, so lonely, so lonely inside real Rome. There's no one, just me only, sitting on my rental throne.
I mean, you know, I know we're supposed to take North Korea seriously, but Kim Jong-il and now Kim Jong-un make it difficult. Plus, I will take any cheap predicate that provides me the opportunity to play Team America clips.
I know.
I mean, how can you not? And this is a real twofer because since Kim Jong-un said he is targeting Guam as the beginning of his assault on the quote-unquote American empire, we get to play Hank Johnson's instant classic.
Oh, yes, about Guam because it might capsize, right?
No, this is a island that at its widest level is, 12 miles from shore to shore.
This is an actual
and
member
at
of
its
Congress.
smallest level, or smallest location, it's 7 miles between one shore and the other.
Why?
Is that correct?
Yeah.
I don't have the exact dimensions, but to your point, sir, I think Guam is a small island.
Very
Yes,
small island.
yeah, I've
about
got that. All right. It's
24
so stipulated.
miles, if I
24
recall, long.
miles.
So
Yeah.
24 miles long, about 7 miles wide at the least widest
Narrowest point of
place
the
on the island.
I
and
love
about
Hank Johnson
20
as the
about 12
hand of the Queen and
miles
King of
wide,
in the Game of Thrones.
on the widest part of the island.
Wow.
And I don't know how many square miles
Sure,
that
yeah,
is. Do
yeah,
you
good question.
happen to know?
I don't have that figure with me, sir. I can certainly supply it to you
Yeah.
if you'd like.
We
Yeah,
can
my-
get that
my
from a
fear
search
is
engine.
that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
We don't anticipate that.
Yeah, that is one of the great exchanges in the history of American politics where you have the commander of the Pacific Fleet having to endure that mind-numbing droning from that stone-ass idiot from Georgia who thinks that Guam just floats on the surface of the water.
Yeah.
And if you put 10,000 more Marines
Yeah,
there,
it's
it
gonna
would
tip over.
capsize. And Admiral Willard, with the restraint and the patience of Job, we don't anticipate that. And he didn't even use this phrase stone-ass idiot, which he should have.
And we're learning this morning Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's going to be heading to Guam.
All right.
I hope it doesn't tip over the...
Well, yeah, I think Tillerson is not concerned about that.
No.
Also, it is worth noting that what Trump inherited a problem that was the result of appeasement over several presidencies, starting, frankly, with Bill Clinton. Remember his presser announcing the great success that he achieved securing peace with North Korea.
I'd like to say just a word about the framework with North Korea that Ambassador Gallucci signed this morning. This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program.
Yeah.
South Korea and our other allies will be better protected. The entire world will be safer as we slow the spread of nuclear weapons.
Right, and that obviously didn't happen. And what Bill Clinton and Democrats and some Republicans think is, no, we just buy these countries off with aid, which is what that deal was from our side, and they stay bought off, except they don't. And former NSA, National Security Advisor General Michael Hayden, made this point on the Obama regime approach as compared to what the Trump administration has achieved already with the UN.
Frankly, the Obama administration, I think, deserves some fair criticism for their strategic patience, which was, frankly, paying this problem forward, not solving it on their watch, and passing it forward to the Trump administration. And the clock's ticking. The North Koreans are becoming more capable, more threatening, at least in their capacity to do things. Look, Chris, sanctions are slow moving. They're like rust as opposed to an explosion, which are identical chemical reactions, but one obviously takes a lot more time. We'll see if over time these sanctions, and the Trump team deserves some credit for getting these sanctions. They are very tough. They kept the Russians on side. They got the Chinese to agree to them as well. But this will be a slow-moving mechanism. And Chris, look, the range of available options are pretty much where the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations were. Sanctions, diplomacy, leaning on the Chinese, leading some sort of eventual negotiations.
All right, for more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Peter Brookes. He is the Senior Fellow for National Security Affairs at the Heritage Foundation. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So you heard General Hayden lay out the options. Is there an option that includes American troops venturing north of the 38th parallel again, in your opinion?
Well, I think only if it was a war was started by North Korea. We have no intention of invading North Korea, but if North Korea were to start a war, that's certainly a possibility. I don't see us, like I said, taking an offensive posture towards North Korea, starting a war unnecessarily, only if we have to protect and defend our interests of the United States and our allies.
So President Trump, I mean, he said that, he responded to North Korea with saying that there's going to be fire and fury. And I'm not clear where his red line is. Are you?
I'm not sure it was a red line. And, you have to be very cautious about red lines. We know that from President Obama and the Syrian chemical weapons, right? Mm-hmm. If you're not willing to, back up a threat. I didn't see what the president said as a red line. I saw it as a very strong statement that I think the North Koreans will understand. They understand power. They understand strength. And I think it was that rhetoric could recalibrate the situation and make North Korea think twice about picking a fight with us or our allies, which is something we don't want. We want them to be deterred. And they need to understand the power of the American nuclear arsenal, the power of the American conventional forces, and that of its allies. So I'm really hoping that makes them think twice. And since we've had that rhetoric and the follow-on rhetoric from North Korea, it's been kind of quiet. Not to say that it'll stay that way, but this could open the doors for some sort of diplomacy when North Korea thinks about what it would mean to have a fight with the United States.
How important are those sanctions that were imposed with the unanimous backing of the National Security Council? Give us an assessment of the significance of that.
Well, I think it's significant. It's a diplomatic victory. Of course, it was short-lived, right? I mean, considering the news that came out, although the government must have known about North Korea's capabilities and this miniaturization of a nuclear weapon to fit inside of a nose cone of a missile. They don't make these assessments as, snap assessments. They think about these things based on what they know. So that's something that they know. And as somebody who served in the Pentagon, I was always wondering recently why they seemed to be so alarmed by North Korea. Understandably, but there seemed to be this sort of imminence and deep concern that had risen, and it's probably based on the information that was leaked out to the public, if it's true. But yeah, sanctions will be helpful. It's not clear, like I think General Hayden said in your lead-in, it takes a while for that to take place. There can be leakage. North Korea uses front companies and shell companies, friends, Iran, for instance, to help them circumvent any sort of punitive economic sanctions. So we'll have to see. I mean, we have to use all the tools in our toolbox to try to deter North Korea and protect and advance American interests.
So who has the next move here?
Well, I'm hoping we'll see a sort of a de-escalation in tensions. And I hope that the president's strong words yesterday help lead to that. It's not clear. I imagine that the Chinese are going to send a senior emissary to North Korea. The president of China has not even met with the North Korean leader, to my knowledge. And they're close allies to a certain extent. I mean, certainly on paper, certainly between their communist parties. But the fact is that I expect the Chinese will be very alarmed by all of this, and they will send an emissary to North Korea to speak with them and to try to lower tensions. There could be somebody else. The Russians could try to play a role. I don't see them. They have a long historical ties to North Korea back to the Soviet days, But I think that people in the region will try to take steps to de-escalate the situation. I personally don't feel like we're on the brink of war. I mean, some of the stuff I've seen in the media, I think, is a bit of hyperbole.
Imagine that.
What's that?
I said, imagine that.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I think it's serious. It's very serious. North Korea is making progress. They have a limited arsenal that could threaten the United States, including where you're broadcasting from. And we need to take it seriously, which means missile defense, conventional deterrence, diplomacy, economic sanctions, information warfare, whatever it takes, and also getting stronger with our allies and discussing the capacities and capabilities of our allies militarily. And some of those things are on the table.
Sebastian Gorka, who's advisor to the president on these matters.
And he'll be on our show tomorrow, by the way. Okay. Program note.
He suggested that, look, North Korea is a paper tiger. To treat them like the D.C. press corps is treating them, like having the same capacity as the former Soviet Union or the current Russia, is a bit over the top.
I see them as very dangerous. I know you're characterizing his words,
right?
So I didn't hear exactly what he said, but let me just say this. I was a senior Pentagon official that worked on Asia during the Bush administration, and I've been to North Korea. I followed them. I spent some time there when I was stationed in Japan during the Cold War. I think I have a pretty good sense. It's a very dangerous animal. We're much more powerful, and South Korea is actually a very capable military as well. No question about that. But they're very dangerous. The Seoul, the capital of South Korea, is a short 25 miles from the DMZ, which is a total misnomer. It's not demilitarized at all.
Mm-hmm.
And they have thousands of artillery tubes that could rain down a significant amount of artillery on the capital, Seoul, which is the home to 10 to 20 million people. And it would be a very ugly war. The level of violence would be unheard of.
And just let's always trying to ascertain a rational end game for even perhaps a somewhat less than rational despot like Kim Jong-un. But ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, North Korea's end game is the reunification of the Korean Peninsula
under North Korean rule.
Right. Yes. Right.
That was. It hasn't changed since 1950. Now, I mean, look, North Korea also, we don't have a good measure of the new leader. They have internal audiences and external audiences. They want to make their internal audience understand the privation they live with. Some of it's self-imposed because of the threats from the outside. You have to come up with this sort of boogeyman to make people put up with what they've had to put up with. Spending, half of their income on nuclear and missile programs. They're saying, well, we're trying to defend you. We need this because the Americans are going to invade us.
Right.
And that's never been the case. I mean, North Korea started the war in 1950 and continues to be a threat to South Korea. So, the end game hasn't changed. And I wish I could think differently, but I just don't see them negotiating away their nuclear weapons. These nuclear weapons and the programs that they have make big powers like China, which they have an interesting relationship with historically. The United States, Russia, it gives them a seat at the table of big powers. Mm-hmm. North Korea is nothing without its nuclear weapons. It's one of the world's poorest countries. Like I said, a lot of it's self-imposed, and people of North Korea are victim of this government. But these nuclear weapons make people pay attention to them and listen to them. And the concern is that when they have these weapons, they'll have greater freedom in terms of policy options. They'll be able to do things that we will see as outrageous because they have these weapons, and there's the possibility that they might use them. Think about several years ago. I can't remember the exact year. I covered a lot of issues at Heritage, but the North Koreans actually sunk a South Korean destroyer. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
With a mini sub. There was like 120 sailors were lost. I forgot the exact number of sailors that were lost. South Korea did nothing because of concerns about the nuclear program, or at least that's my interpretation of it. So if you have a powerful weapon like this that you might use, you might do things that people are afraid to respond to because of that. This gives them tremendous power and leverage. So that's one of the reasons. So in my mind, I think, why would they give it up? you can always say, look, everybody's got their price, right? Well, their price is probably reunification with South Korea under North Korean rule.
Yeah, that's not going to be paid. Right.
Yeah. So I think it's a very difficult, Republican or Democrat, whatever administration, it's a very difficult problem. And there have been some well-intentioned policies in the past that have not played out well, and you mentioned one of them, the agreed framework under the Clinton administration. But it was well-intentioned. I mean, they were trying to avoid. We were almost at war in 1994. If you go back and look at it, there was a real crisis back in '94 over this. They were well-intentioned. It wasn't a good program. I mean, I was on the opposite side of the aisle. I was a congressional staffer later in the 1990s and did oversight of this, and we were concerned they were cheating, which I found out when I was in the Bush administration that they were cheating on this. So a lot of it comes down to risk management. I don't know that it's necessarily going to go away. And it's going to be a real challenge like the Cold War was for us from 1950 to 1992.
All right. He is Peter Brookes, Senior Fellow for National Security Affairs at the Heritage Foundation. Peter, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're